Might even be faster just to have you guys come up and sign the roll. Pass it around anyway. Guys excited to talk about plants? Good. Admittedly, chapters 29 and 30 are pretty much just memorization stuff. There's not a lot of concepts involved. So I didn't even make like unique slides because really literally all you need to know on 29 and 30 is straight from Dr. Mott's slides, 29 and 30. So it's kind of up to you guys, but we can just go through the slides in the same order as they were in class, and you guys can ask any questions that you have, or if you already have questions, you can just pose them now. Does anybody have questions before we just start? Is there a topic from these chapters that was more difficult? Are you just here because this is where you come every Wednesday at 5? I assume you're here because you need help with the material, no? Which parts?
Well, like, what's it called when, like, the sporangium, I guess, makes, like, the female and male gamete, or, like, the...
Are you looking at here?
What's that called?
This life cycle?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know what that is. So, these, if you notice, are pretty similar to the fungal life cycles, right? Except that good night. Fungi spent most of their time haploid or diploid? Haploid, right? Plants, it's essentially like a 50-50 split, right? This whole part here, whether it's a spore, a gametophyte, or a gamete, is haploid, and then while it's the sporophyte, it is diploid, right? I would recommend being able to draw this cycle, just like the rest of them, right? Every time there's a cycle in biology, be able to draw it, right? And this one's super easy. You really just have to know meiosis makes spores that make the gametophyte, haploid, right? Becomes gametes, pretty easy to remember. They get fertilized, become a zygote, just like in humans, except that zygote then becomes a sporophyte, right? Not like a fetus. And then back to meiosis, right? That's all you need to know. And don't forget, sporophyte is the only diploid part. So, can I jump ahead to an actual cycle? Or are you guys still working on this? Okay, you're fine. And like I said, this is just Dr. Mott's PowerPoint. I didn't really feel like making my own since it's just memorizing what he's got on there. So, why does it keep doing that? Maybe if I click OK. All right, so again, meiosis makes your spores. And then there's the male gametophyte and the female gametophyte, right there. In plants, you have to have male and female. The male gametophyte then releases sperm. The female gametophyte has an egg down inside of it, and then they fertilize, quite similar to humans, right? Sperm meets egg, fertilizes in essentially the womb of the plant, if you want to think of it that way. Okay, and then that makes your diploid zygote. Okay, starts to form the embryo, which then forms your sporophyte, and then you do meiosis again, right? So you don't really need to worry about like weird random details. Really just know everything that appears on the generalized cycle, right? Meiosis, spores, gametophyte, gametes, fertilization, sporophyte. Questions with that? Does that help with your question that you had? You've got one.
So there's something called like
Homospore
yeah.
and heterospore.
Yeah,
Yeah. He like glanced over it. It might be in the other one. He glanced over it for a couple of seconds, but yeah, that is. You guys see it? That is a vocab term you have to know. Is that in 35 maybe?
I think it was in the last one you were just saying.
Oh, was it in the 29?
And is it
Ah, here. You think it wouldn't be that hard to find. Okay. So, oops. Homospore, heterospore, right? So, homospore or homospore, I've heard it both ways. The gametophytes are bisexual, right? So they are both male and female at the same time. And they still fertilize each other, but the male fertilizes the female, but then the female is also male, so then it fertilizes back. So if this is one gametophyte and this is another gametophyte, and we'll say plus is male and minus is female, right? They're both. So the male fertilizes the female, but then this one also fertilizes back, right? Understood? Okay. So then heterospore, or heterospore, however you prefer to say it, is just, it's one or the other, right? It is male or female, and so the male fertilizes the female, right? Usually in like organisms that don't necessarily have a sex, you'll see just plus and minus. Plants obviously technically have a male and a female part, but if you see plus and minus, it works essentially the same way. Plus for male, minus for female. Not really any particular reason as to why. Just because could have done A and B. Cool beans? Does that help? Yeah. I know, yeah, he only spent a couple of seconds on it. It is a vocab term I would be familiar with. It's not massively complex, and you won't have to know like which types of plants, like which specific type of plant is homosporous. You'd have to be like, oh, I know that this type of fern, like nothing like that, right? You just have to be able to know the difference between them, like what each one means and how they're different from each other. Right? Okay. What else do you guys have questions on? Either from 29 or 30 or 35 that we started to cover.
So in some cases, the sporophyte is free living, or like kind of on its own. I just don't remember which ones are and which ones aren't.
Let's see if I can find one. Ooh. Maybe it was in the other one. Because the issue is I don't remember off the top of my head either. Does anybody remember which ones were free living and not free living? No? Me either. Yeah, I don't remember off the top of my head which ones are and which ones aren't. That's what I get for not preparing slides, right?
Well, like the sporophytes, like the ferns, like sporophytes are like the dominant. I guess like when it's a fern, it's like a sporophyte, and when it's a moss, it's a gametophyte.
let's see if I can find what you're talking about. So you're saying, and is this what you're asking, like the sporophyte from ferns?
Yeah, like, because I thought like they were kind of like their own thing, like they kind of like wouldn't have to depend on the plant. I don't know, maybe I just didn't that correctly. I don't know.
I thought they were always fruitless, because they're not.
I don't know that they all are. And I can't find a slide that. So, yeah, sometimes they are and sometimes they aren't. And that's the issue. I can't find one that specifically says this one is and this one isn't. And I honestly don't have that memorized. Does it shock you guys that I don't have every detail about plants memorized? Dr. Mott does. That's why I told you guys, plants is his thing. And like you could ask him literally anything about plants, which is why it's also the one that you have to know the best. 29 and 30, not so much, because again, it's just kind of a list of names and a couple of cycles, right? So you just have to be able to know like a non-vascular plant versus a vascular plant, and then like a seedless plant versus a seed plant, what they are, and a few of the examples. So like a fern is a seedless vascular plant, right? Or a ginkgo is a gymnosperm seed plant, which is vascular, right? So just that kind of stuff. So maybe we'll look at some of what chapter 35 was on. I feel like that's a little bit more conceptual. So again, just memorize this cycle. Memorize each of these categories, so non-vascular and vascular, and then the subcategories of seedless and seed, and then the subcategory of gymnosperm versus angiosperm, and kind of their differences, right? And then the classic examples, right? So doesn't want to let me draw, is it? Because I didn't. I do this every time. So like moss, liverwort, hornwort, non-vascular. Club moss, fern, whisk, horsetail, vascular, but seedless, right? And then conifers, cycads, ginkgo, needham is gymnosperms, which are seeded, vascular. And then flowering plants are the angiosperms. They're seeded, they're vascular. Right? Does that make sense? You guys all okay with that? Okay. Mossbury, heterosbury, we already talked about. Monocots versus dicots, we didn't get into this in class yet. We'll get into it on Friday. So if you want basically a sneak peek at it, or you want to get ahead on some of the memorization, right? The monocots have all of these characteristics, and the dicots have those. 1 cotyledon versus 2, that's just kind of a small kind of vein-like structure inside of them. So monocots have 1, dicots have 2. The monocots have parallel leaves. The dicots have the vein-like structure. The way that I remember this is I know that corn is a monocot, so I picture a corn leaf in my head, right? And this is pretty much what a corn leaf looks like. And so I know, it's got sort of just the straight veins on it. And then with the dicots, I think of you guys ever watched The Land Before Time? Right, and he's always trying to eat leaves that look exactly like that. So with dicots, I just think Land Before Time. It doesn't have to make sense to you. You can come up with your own way, but that's how it makes sense to me, right? We haven't talked about what vascular bundles are yet, so don't freak out that you don't know that word. But monocots have complex arrangement. They're kind of all over the place. Dicots will form a pretty strong ring structure, right? The monocots have fibrous roots, so they kind of go more out as compared to down, right? The dicots go down. And then the monocots are in threes for their floral parts. So 3, 6, 9, 12, on and on and on, right? Whereas dicots are 4s and 5s. So 4, 8, 16, oh, I guess I skipped 12. Or like 5, 10, 15. How many leaves does marijuana have? 7? I don't think it fits either of those. Marijuana is its own thing. I don't know. I just feel like, yeah, it just occurred to me that I don't know how many leaves marijuana has.
So monocot and dicot, is that just another classification?
Yeah.
We have plants?
So plants are either going to be monocotic or dicotic. So again, just a sneak peek. We didn't cover this yet. This is if you want to start memorizing it early. And again, it's just memorize each category. Yeah.
So you kind of mentioned it in the 830 class, and I thought you said, like, I don't know, the monocots would for sure have the one pollen thing, but then the other 4 things aren't for sure.
Oh yeah, this isn't like a guarantee. Like if it doesn't have parallel veins, it doesn't mean it's not a dicot. I should have said that, and I guess we'll talk about it on Friday. This is the decider. If it has 1 cotyledon, it's monocotic. 2 cotyledons, dicotic, right? Usually, then these things follow, but you could have a monocot with like that kind of vascular bundle structure, right? So it's not a hard and fast rule. This is just most of the time, but this is always, and this is always, and again, most of the time. So that's a good catch. He must have had a little bit more time than we did in the 9:30, or I fell asleep right at the end. Who knows? Other questions with this? Don't freak out that you're like, what? Because again, we didn't talk about it yet. Okay. We talked about longevity, right? How long a plant lives. Okay. So if it's annual, lives 1 year, right? It sprouts, it flowers, it passes out its seeds, it does everything that a plant does, right? For 1 year, and then it dies. And then the next generation starts, right? Biennial, not super hard. Bi, 2, lives for 2 years, right? So the carrot was one of the examples that he gave us. The first year it makes the carrot, and then if you don't come by and eat it, the second year it flowers up, and then it dies. And then perennials, so plants that stick around for a long time. Can you guys think of any? Trees, grass, huh? Bamboo, bushes, right? Most of the plants that we're familiar with are perennials, right? Mostly because they stick around long enough for us to familiarize ourselves with them, right? Whereas lots of like wildflowers and stuff just pop up for a year and die and leave, right? So again, just vocab, memorize the 3 kinds. This is how long they live, right? That's compared against monocarpic and polycarpic, right? Has nothing to do with how long they live. They could live a year, they could live 100 years, they could be monocarpic or polycarpic, right? Those aren't like tied together. So mono, 1, it will flower once, right? So even if it's alive for 128 years, like bamboo, it only flowers once. It's what, annual, biennial, or perennial? Bamboo, 128 years. Perennial, right? But it only flowers once. So what is it? Monocarpic, right? So it's monocarpic and perennial, right? Then you could have like your cherry trees, right, in your backyard. They're polycarpic. They flower every spring, right? Even if it's only a plant that lives 1 year, maybe it flowers a couple times in a year. I don't know of any examples that do that. I think that would be a waste of energy, but even if it only lived 2 years and it flowered each year, then it's now polycarpic, right? It flowered more than once. Got it? Not exactly rocket science, but where I see people get confused is thinking annuals have to be monocarpic and biennials and perennials have to be polycarpic, right? Because if it's around for 128 years, how does it only flower once? Certain plants do, right? Bamboo does that, okay? So these are not the same thing. They're not associated with each other. They can mix and match however they want, okay? So don't go into the test thinking that's like a rule, monocarpic and annual, okay? Questions? I think from here on in my slides, because I prepared these last year, is stuff we haven't covered yet. So if that freaks you out a little bit, that's all the stuff that we're going to talk about. Different cell types, and then different tissue types, and then vascular bundles and vascular tissue and phloem and ground tissue, right? There's about to be a whole lot of vocab coming up. So if you were planning on not going to class on Friday, I would rethink that for sure. For me, I've said it a bunch of times, I'll say it again because I want people to not underestimate it because it's just plants. Plants was the hardest part of the class for me personally, right? Partly because I don't find plants massively interesting, so it's kind of not as much fun to study, right? But also they're very complex. They're far more complex than you would think. And there's all kinds of combinations of cell types and monocots, and right, there's a whole lot of vocab that you're going to have to learn, and some concepts tied with them. So be prepared for that. All right. Questions? You guys still have stuff from 29 and 30 that you're wondering about, have questions on, stuck on? It's not that I don't want to talk about it, it's that most of it is just memorization. So I could sit up here and list names at you, but you could also sit at home and do that to yourself. I'm a little bit more helpful with the conceptual stuff. Just a little bit. Yeah?
Can you go over the dominant stages of just both types of plants?
The dominant stages, as in?
Like the seedless dominant stage is the Bryophytes, right?
So you want to look at oh, what the heck? How did that happen? So you want to look at the cycles and then like which stage is dominant?
Yeah.
Okay. So this should be let me double check. So these are the Bryophytes, non-vascular. Who remembers non-vascular Bryophytes? Nobody wrote it down. Somebody has to have written it down or remember. What's the dominant stage for Bryophytes that are non-vascular? All Bryophytes are non-vascular. Okay, it's the gametophyte. So right. What does dominant mean? Yeah. It's the one that kind of sticks around. So it's usually the physical structure that we see, right? So when you see a Bryophyte, this is usually what you see. Partly because this is like microscopic, right? These are individual cells. So you would have to look at that under a microscope. But this is the physical structure that you see. Let's do still Bryophytes. This is seedless vascular plants. What's dominant? You could have peeked on the left there.
Sporophyte.
Right? Mature sporophyte. That's usually what you see when you see like a fern. What other one am I missing? It's all the cycles that he's got. So we've looked at non-vascular and vascular, right? We looked at seedless vascular. I think 30 is what has the seeded vascular. These are the gymnosperms. Anybody? Nobody. Not a single person has an idea. Sporophyte. Oh, I keep doing that. Can I give somebody a seizure? Right? Again, when you look at a pine tree, what do you usually see? Pine cones, right? I mean, it depends on exactly what time of year you're looking at them. If they've fallen off the tree, they're obviously gone. But most of the time you see a pine tree, you see a pine cone, right? So that's the sporophyte. That's what sticks around the longest. That should be the three of them. Did I miss any? So we did non-vascular, and then seedless vascular, and now seeded vascular, right? Is there another cycle we can look at? That might have been all of them. What's this? Whoa. Huh? Angiosperm, which is, first off, vascular or non-vascular? It's vascular. Seedless or seeded? Seeded, okay. And then there are two kinds of seeded vascular plants. What are they? Gymnosperm and angiosperm. Okay, so we said this was an angiosperm, right? What's the difference between like an angiosperm and a gymnosperm? Angiosperms have flowers, okay? So if you can associate in your head, gymnosperm is like a pine tree, right? An angiosperm is like a daisy, right? And then that helps you pretty quick be able to go, okay, I can fairly easily see the difference between a pine tree and a daisy, right? The daisy is a nice, pretty flower, and a pine tree is ugly, and it just has pine cones. And great for Christmas, and that's about it, right? But they're here all year. We love it. You'll actually, when we start talking about structures, you'll find out why gymnosperms stick around all year. They don't have to drop their leaves like angiosperms do, right? Like a cherry tree has to essentially die in the winter, drop all its leaves, but a pine tree doesn't, right? So we'll look at that probably on Friday. So, sorry, I got way off track. What's the dominant generation here? Still the sporophyte, right? Oh, why is it not let it? I don't even know what's going on anymore. Okay, that should do it. Right? It's the flower. It's what you see, right? You look at a daisy, you look at a tulip. Those are the two flowers that come to me off the top of my head. You see the flower, right? That's the sporophyte. That's the dominant generation. That's what sticks around. Okay? Anybody still confused on, first off, just what a dominant generation is? No? So someone explain it to me then, since all of you just acknowledged you know what it is.
It's like the thing we see. It's like the structure that we see all the time.
Yeah, it's the visible structure. It takes up most of the life cycle, right? It's what's around the longest, if not always. So then the task that you have is being able to go and say that non-vascular plants, what's dominant again? Gametophyte. So non-vascular gametophyte. Let's see. And then vascular, what's dominant? Sporophyte. And then, all types of seeded plant, whether it's, or sorry, not seeded, all types of vascular, whether it's seeded or non-seeded. Sporophyte, right? So they're all sporophyte except for the non-vascular, right?
Can you run through this, the process, like the triploid process, and how that comes to be one more time? I got confused in that class.
This right here?
Yeah, essentially how it goes from pollen to another plant, a germinated seed.
So you're saying how it goes from a pollen grain to a where?
To a germinated seed.
All the way over here?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So this is our gametophyte, right? Male gametophyte. Okay. It finds a pollen tube, okay, and attaches to it, which is attached to essentially the ovary of the plant. So your pollen is now attached to the outside of the plant, right? Then you have your female gametophyte down inside of the ovary. I don't know why I was getting myself confused. Which arose from the center of the flower is this ovary, right? Has an ovule on it, which is just the segments of the ovary. You undergo meiosis, okay, to have your megaspore. So that's where this thing comes from. And then the sperm gets inside, right, to fertilize it. You get a zygote that starts to develop, just like in humans. And then just like in humans, we even call it an embryo, right? And it's made up of the embryo, the endosperm, which is kind of like the amniotic fluid in a human. It's just the food supply for that, for the embryo. And then the seed coat is eventually going to just form the seed, right? So like a sunflower seed, the part that you chew and then spit out is the seed coat. Obviously right here it's not fully developed yet, but that's the seed coat. And then the seed that you actually eat is the embryo, right? That sperm and egg that fertilized. And eventually, had you not picked that off of a sunflower, but it had fallen in the dirt, would have turned into a new sunflower, right? Does that help? Okay.
And then on top of that real quick, how many ovules are there in the, or here, I don't know how to word this. How many of the ovules are being germinated? Is it just one ovule per plant, or do all 8 of those ovules?
I don't know the exact number, mostly because they won't even all have the same number. Larger plants will have more ovules. If I were to take a guess, I would say probably all of them get fertilized. I would guess why the plant would do it, but
And then from there they just disperse into more seed
Yeah, they just turn into a bunch of seeds. So like, have you ever seen a sunflower? The big brownish part in the middle there, those are all seeds. That's like thousands of seeds. And each of those falls out and becomes its own thing, right? Or like the dandelions before they're yellow and you blow on them and make a wish, right? And each of those little things that Flick from Bug's Life held on to when he flew across the canyon, you guys know what I'm talking about. Each of those is a seed, right? So it's not like a plant makes one seed. I would guess that all of them. It's also not probably a test question you would see. Yeah?
What does it mean that angiosperms do double fertilization?
Double fertilization?
Yeah, that's just mastering bio.
Yeah, they've hit on a couple mastery bio questions.
Mastery bio questions, double fertilization. I'm drawing a blank on that. This is what I do when you guys email me and you're like, what's this? And I'm like, I don't know. And then I Google it and I'm like, I totally know what that is. Okay, so it looks like, oh. From what I understand from 3 seconds of looking at Google, as the sperm comes into the egg, the sperm discharges 2 nuclei into just the whole egg in general, and then 1 bonds with the actual egg nucleus, right? So that's what becomes, can I zoom in on this? Oh, I can. That's what becomes the zygote right there. Does it show you the little hand? You guys see what I'm circling with the hand? I can't draw when I'm zoomed in, apparently. So 1 part of the sperm fertilizes the egg and makes the zygote, just like in a human. But then 2 other pieces, essentially, from the sperm, 2 little nuclei parts, make the endosperm, right, that eventually becomes kind of like the amniotic fluid. So I guess it's saying that this is one fertilization event and this is another fertilization event. So double fertilization. Does that help at all?
Yeah.
Kind of?
I don't understand why it matters.
Welcome to biology. No. That was a very cynical thing for the biology SI to say. For this class, it matters that you know what it's called so that you can answer mastering bio questions. For like a test, not a whole lot. If you just understand what double fertilization is, you should be fine, right? And again, not massively difficult. I looked at it on Google right here, right now with all of you. I'm not gonna lie, I do it all the time. I hope you guys too. Like if you get stuck on something, just Google it. And then if Google doesn't make sense or you're not sure that that's the right information, yeah, then textbook or me or Dr. Mott or whatever, right? But use your resources, right? That's what I do. Other questions? Chapter 29 or 30. Would you like to get out 10 minutes early? I'm going to take the packing up to mean a yes.
Do you still have SI next week?
Yeah, so I'm going to hold a regular session Monday, still just 5 to 5:50 right in here. And then Chase is going to hold a super session on the genetics chapters that same night at 6. And then I'm going to do a super session on the first chapters. I think it's like 1 through 12. So all of Dr. Mott's first bit of class. I'll do that Wednesday at 6:30 where we have class. So not 5:30. Usually my super sessions are at 5:30, right? This one's at 6:30. And then Hillary is going to do the last chapter, so this stuff and everything else that we finished through the week Thursday, probably at 6:30 as well. So there's 3 super sessions next week and at least 1 regular session. I don't know if Hillary will also hold a regular session on Tuesday or not. I can ask her tomorrow. How many of you guys go to both? Go to like mine and Hillary's? You know you go to both, right? I've every once in a while had students go. I didn't. At the end of the semester, they're like, I didn't realize that like she wasn't the SI for like a separate thing. I'm like, no, it's not. You go to both. We talk about the same stuff, but yeah. Super sessions next week, like crazy. All right, sounds like you guys are packing up, so let's get the heck out of here.